I received an invitation from the Jewish Museum in 2017 to make an exhibition that addressed the resurgence of anti-Semitism in the country. And it was suggested that the exhibition could include work from the collection of the Jewish Museum, works from other sources, my own work. The invitation was very open. I see the resurgence of anti-Semitism in America as an outgrowth of a broader phenomenon, of a rise of ethno-nationalism and authoritarianism around the globe. Immigrants in particular have been under siege, and we're tragically reminded almost every week that violence against Black and brown people at the hands of the police is something that continues unabated.
One of the things we're hearing from Jonathan is how artists are always thinking about and processing their lived experience. You're seeing this here in this exhibition, with many from different generations contending with racism, anti-Semitism, bigotry, and other forms of social injustice. We were planning on opening the show in March of 2020, and then all of a sudden the museum had to temporarily close due to the pandemic. And really since then, the world has completely changed. We've had the broadening and the strengthening of a powerful movement around Black Lives Matter after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis at the end of May. So the momentum of this time and the dramatic events that have unfolded now means that we need to see this exhibition in a new light, and perhaps with even greater urgency.
When I started working on the exhibition, one of the first things that I thought about was the Jewish Museum itself and its history. The building was formerly the mansion of a wealthy family, and the first room that you enter is the most like a domestic space. The wallpaper, which I designed for the room, is a work that I made in response to Andy Warhol's 10 Portraits of Jews of the 20th Century. My work, 10 Portraits of Jews of the 20th Century, plus 92 more, consists of all of the Jewish subjects that Warhol is known to have painted. For most of the subjects, their Jewish heritage is invisible or negligible as part of their public personas. So the piece is in part about assimilation, which I think you have to address when you're talking about anti-Semitism.
Jonathan is often playing upon recognizable subjects and imagery drawn out of popular culture, but he's also interested in how art history reinforces particular narratives and stereotypes. In many ways, this is a subject of Robert Colescott's large satirical painting, George Washington Carver Crossing the Delaware, page from an American history textbook. It's actually a contemporary take on another work, a classic history painting that depicts a Revolutionary War event that contributed to America's quest for independence in 1776. 200 years later, around the time of the bicentennial, Colescott tackles the same story by reinventing the earlier composition, but from a starkly different vantage point. Here the subject of race comes to the forefront. At the prow of Colescott's boat is George Washington Carver, the famous Black scientist, inventor, and educator who revolutionized agricultural practices in the South in the early 20th century. Behind him in the boat are other figures, all rendered in the style of exaggerated caricature. In this work, Colescott forces viewers to really confront the degrading power of visual representation. He said that this was his bicentennial statement on American history, and he's really asking viewers to consider the complexity of freedom narratives for a country that's marred by a history of slavery.
In 2009, the sign that hangs above the gates to the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland was stolen. The sign reads Arbeit macht frei, which translates as work sets you free. Shortly after the theft, the sign was found in a nearby field, cut into pieces. A Swedish neo-Nazi was later convicted of masterminding the theft, and it was speculated that the sign was stolen to sell to a collector of Nazi memorabilia. My work, untitled Arbeit macht frei, was made the following year, in 2010, and it recreates the Arbeit macht frei sign in the form that it was found, cut into pieces. So it documents that moment in time. When I made the work, I was thinking about what it means to preserve a symbol of evil, what it means to destroy a symbol of evil, and what it means to copy such a thing. I decided to install the work with Maniewicz's Destruction of the Ghetto as a reminder of times when assimilation was not even an option for Jewish people. The works together are a sobering contrast to the Warhol wallpaper and speak of the persistence of anti-Semitism.
As an artist, I'm interested in telling stories about history, things like war, migration.
Some of the things that I've been really concerned with is how you define identity and what reality is and blur of truth.
A lot of my work tends to be political.
When I thought of my political platform, it was save the birds and the bees, please.
My poster is called A Revolution. It represents indigenous connection to place, indigenous resilience.
Just thinking about like agency, the agency that we don't always necessarily recognize that we possess.
I'm asking people to call out governments.
If it can change one mind, that's enough for me.
It's very important to take a moment and reflect on the title of the exhibition, We Fight to Build a Free World. Just the phrase, we fight, assumes that freedom is not a given. It's something that you have to earn and defend. And I think we're at a moment now where we're really conscious of how easily human rights can be violated. The title also begs the question, who constitutes the we in this statement? Actually, the name of the show has a historic reference as well. It comes from a painting by Ben Shahn from 1942, in which he calls attention to human suffering and trauma. You see in this very small composition, he's including posters by Edward Millman, Katie Kollwitz, Yasuo Koniyoshi, and Bernard Perlin. He's really making a statement and reminding us that artists have always been very involved and engaged with activism and protest. So I think there's a real parallel here between the work of Ben Shahn from the 1940s and what Jonathan is doing, where he's creating an exhibition around these urgent issues, and he's inviting artists into the conversation.
You will not replace us! You will not replace us! We are allies! We are allies!
The events in Charlottesville, I think, were a wake-up call to many Americans that racism and anti-Semitism are alive and well. The pretext for the Unite the Right rally was the Charlottesville City Council's decision to remove the Robert E. Lee Confederate Monument from the park where it had stood for 95 years. After the rally, the City Council ordered that the statue be covered in a black tarp, which created a sort of ready-made anti-monument, which I found to be very powerful and ominous. So I decided to replicate the sculpture covered with the tarp using fixed materials as a way to mark that moment in time. Much of the work around it is historical. And for me, the sculpture kind of brings everything back to the present.
It's also got this very dramatic backdrop, which is this huge reproduction based on a painting by Thomas Hart Benton that Jonathan drained of its color. It's a kind of foil or backdrop to an array of other artworks. Benton, who was a regionalist painter, made a series really focused on generating support for the U.S. involvement in World War II. And to do that, he used a lot of stereotypes and racist depictions in these very bloody, often apocalyptic scenes of turmoil and chaos.
The artworks that are hung on top of the Benton mural are ideologically contrary to the message of the Benton painting. In response to what was going on in Europe, many social realist artists looked critically at what was going on in America. And the works here all engage with the fight for social justice at home.
One of the themes that one could pick up on in this last room is this notion of divisiveness, of boundaries.
The works are a reminder that it may be a fallacy to say that this land is either your land or my land. That the land that one group or person is claiming as their own today was quite likely claimed by someone else in the past, and it may be claimed by someone else in the future. Working on the exhibition, I asked myself some very basic questions, like what is the Jewish Museum? What is its history? And what is its mission today? And even more basically, what does it mean to be Jewish? I don't think about being Jewish all of the time, but I think about it more of the time lately. This exhibition is in part an answer to that question of what it means to be Jewish. And for me, the answer has something to do with knowing about the history of Jewish people and what we've been through, and having the commitment to fight for social justice, not just for Jewish people, but for all people.